My name is Pamela Bloom. I'm with Fujifilm, and I'll be moderating this panel today. And I have to say that as we were in the speaker lounge, my cheeks are hurting from the laughter. And yes, I'm going to say that joke. What is the difference between God and a cinematographer? Wait, what is it? God doesn't say he's a cinematographer. Did I do it right? Okay. We got one clap. I'm going to go ahead and have you guys introduce yourselves. So we'll start with Fernando.
Hi, my name is Fernando. I'm a director cinematographer based in Central America, and I've been working with this lovely group of people for a couple of years now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Geffen. I'm a Brooklyn-based cinematographer and director, freelancer. Also, having worked with this lovely bunch and Fujifilm for the last about 3 years.
Hi, my name is Golnar, and I'm a San Diego-based director and cinematographer working for Fujifilm for the last couple of years with this group of people.
I'm Castro. I'm a cinematographer. I've been working with them as well for like 2.5 years now. And yeah, this is lovely to be here. So thank you.
What's up, y'all? I am Dmitry, also a director cinematographer. Same thing that they said. And it's like this lovely group of people. It's been great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And you know what? Their work really does speak for themselves. And throughout the panel today, some of their work will be up on the screen, kind of playing in the background to show the depth of their creativity and what they do. But I do want to dive right in because we do have a large group up on here and your stories are absolutely incredible. So we're going to just go right into the meat of things. You know, the limitation of tools can sometimes and often inspire some really amazing creativity. So I want you guys to share some of your experiences where you've created something so powerful with those limitations and the tools that you guys have. I think they're looking at you, Kevin.
I'll jump in. So, most of what may be seen, if we show the highlight reel, the projects that we create for Fujifilm are created with a very small mirrorless APS-C sensor camera. It's a hybrid camera. It's the XH2S. There's plenty of them over there. You can go and have a look at this thing. It's tiny. It's not got the dynamic range of an Alexa or a Red. It's very powerful, but when you look at this thing and when you see it, especially with photo lenses on, it does not look capable. This thing packs a huge punch. It's the production camera that we're all issued with. It's what we create with. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a limitation, but it's not a cinema camera. We aren't going out there all guns a blazing with all the lenses and the gear that we want. We've taken these cameras, and everyone here will speak to this, into the jungles of Colombia, into the wilds of Africa, into the heat of New Orleans in the height of the summer, and they just keep working. Yes, it's a limitation. It's a small camera. It's a small thing. You have to be very careful about exposing correctly for the shadows, not just the highlights. However, it's also very small and deft and nimble, which means you can take it anywhere and you can really run and gun with something like that, more so than what you can do with a fully kitted out rig that we would all look at and say, well, this is a proper cinema rig. So to me, that there's a limitation, but with every limitation, there comes a positive. And for me, that's the small, nimble nature of these cameras. And if a camera goes down, we've got 2 or 3 more in the bag because they're so small. So we never have to worry about what happens if the main camera goes down and we're in the middle of a jungle without access to partners that can fly in another camera.
Mm-hmm.
Also going on top of just the form factor. So this past, when was it? July. We had a production in, Portland, Oregon, or like the Hood River, Oregon, nearby in the Columbia River Gorge, where we were, photographing, wing foilers. They're kind of like, it's like kite surfing, but the wing is a lot smaller and they stand on a foil. And a lot of that is just like weather dependent, conditions dependent on who's out there and how fast people can get out. I mean, these people, they're kind of like surfers, right? They just like wait for the perfect gust of wind. And when it's there, everybody's out there. So for us to document that, to have basically how it worked is that we were just on call the whole time waiting for the perfect wind conditions. And when they were set, I could, all of that stuff fits in a Pelican. So anytime I would get a call to get out there, just grab the Pelican, head out with all the lenses that we needed. And as soon as we got there, we had we jumped in a boat to get some shots of them closer in the river. I could just take all of the cameras, all the gear, everything packs in. And that's our whole cinema package, basically. It's so compact, even with the photo lenses. We use the MKX lenses often on those as well, but even those are small and light. So everything fits within this tiny Pelican. I could take it on a boat. I could scramble over rocks with it. It's just, very nimble.
Now, Kevin, I've been on a few projects with you as a producer working with these limitations, and seeing the work that you get in, whether it's a music festival, whether out in the ocean, whether it's not. Tell me, I see the inspiration in your eyes. Tell me about that.
Well, going back to limitations, I face a lot of limitations mainly in post because of budget reasons. There's never enough money for coloring. So my creativity gets to come out when I am shooting, and I have to dial in the look. I have to bake in the look myself because I know there will be no time in post. So that's where I get to be creative. I get to dial in a distinct look. And the shows that we've been working on, we've worked together all for years. Me and Golnar have worked together for almost a decade. And the companies that we work for, they're used to a certain look, and it's usually two very big competitors that they're used to. So when they see a baked in look with the Fuji camera, it definitely stands out. So for me, that's where I get to be creative.
Nice. Now, with this visual storytelling, that story takes over. Well, it precedes the tools, meaning it's more important than the tools you have. How do you teach that storytelling when you are limited with the resources, when we're out in like a mile off the coast and off of Florida? Or tell me how your storytelling drives what you're doing, whether you have the tools or not. That makes sense.
Well, I think that everything starts before we get to production, right?
Absolutely.
There's
Absolutely.
a lot of conversations that are happening. Sometimes we're working as a team. Sometimes we're working solo with other teams. And I think that a lot of the planning goes into the conversations to make sure that we know what the story is about to begin with. It's not easy to work with a team of cinematographers or other camera people without knowing what you're actually wanting to capture and then not stepping in each other's footsteps, right?
So you're not God.
No, let me see. None of us are. So there's a lot of planning, a lot of intentionality behind what we're doing. And, we were recently out this year shooting for a documentary, out in Africa, like Dave was sharing earlier. And we need to go through the schedule and make sure that we're picking the right times of day that we're shooting at to maximize the capabilities of these cameras. They are comparable to many other cameras out there, but we need to understand that because it is a hybrid camera, we need to make sure that the conditions are as best as possible to make sure that the image that we're capturing, is as of the best quality possible. So a lot of planning, a lot of communication, and also being very intentional with the story itself, because we can plan and forget the story. But if we know what we want to achieve in terms of the documentary or the behind the scenes video that we're doing, the message, who the characters are, what we're trying to convey, then it's easier to be out in the field knowing the types of shots that we want to get.
Absolutely.
I think for just speaking on intentionality, what I've learned over these 2 years working with these wonderful people is that the intentionality in crafting the story comes from basically writing it out like you would a screenplay, like a narrative screenplay. To me, when I was starting out, that was so boring because I just assumed documentary was all about, you capture something, you get interviews, you get a bunch of B-roll, and then you structure it together. What clicked in my mind and helped prepare not only for this, the kind of the technical side, but also just the story side, is that hearing what the person has to say, doing like a pre-interview, and then structuring basically a narrative script based on what kind of information they give you And to me, at first I thought it was just, it felt so weird because I thought I was like putting words in their mouth, but really it's all about hearing what they have to say and then piecing together the story so that you have a full narrative script. And that way you can actually, shot for shot, you can know what shots you need to capture, no more, no less. So you could be very efficient about it and then plan for conditions and everything else like that. So that was a huge step, I think, at least for me in my creative process and making the story more intentional but better.
Absolutely. Now, you can plan all you want, but things are going to happen. And we've been on set where that has happened. But to me, the experience pulled everything together to where we had a really successful project. Tell me about some of the challenges when plans do fall apart.
We'll start with this one. I think that very often in documentary, even if you try to plan as much as you can, it's never going to go the way that you have it in your mind because real life takes precedence over everything, right? So one of the most important things you can do, kind of always be touching base with your team and knowing that you all are on the same page so that when things change, you're still going towards the same goal as opposed to everyone scrambling and rushing to try to get something. It's constantly about communication. It's about checking in as much as you can. It's about seeing where things are going to go next.
No, the clicker finally works. So we can get it to, there we go.
And I'm going to say Kevin and I actually have worked together for, as he said, like a decade. And we've been cam ops for each other back and forth and both being on the same production as A and B cam back and forth. And something that we experienced that I think changed things for us is we did a project together where we actually were utilizing within the Fujifilm cameras, a system called camera to cloud, where you're sending your footage straight up into the cloud and you can see it immediately. And something that did and changed for us is instead of later on in the day looking and seeing what we did as two separate operators, and if it melds together, we were able right away to see, hey, you got this, I got this works, we can move on to something. And we are able to effectively communicate via our footage, even if we're nowhere near each other in our space. And that made us much better storytellers as a team, I think.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of tools like that, are there other, I wouldn't say hidden tools, but other aspects in your toolbox, hence the name of the panel, that you guys use that help you tell these stories that are, they're special? And I don't want to really fully dive into gear, whether it's camera to cloud. Like, what are some of the things that you guys use to help with your business?
Sorry, one thing which actually I've learned from everyone here, especially something that Fernando recently, was using a sound bed with video. So just a quick show of hands, how many people are actually creating motion-based projects here? Yep. So most of you, I'm sure, understand the importance of the sound bed, but what Fernando did on a number of projects I only noticed really recently is instead of just a piece of music being underneath the story, you crafted very intricately
ambient sound that brought me to the location of where you were. And those weren't captured, I think, in the moment necessarily, but it fit so well. And that, I think, for us as filmmakers and photographers, we're very visual people, and we often forget about the importance of what we're listening to immerse ourselves into a visual story. And I think this speaks to everybody, but particularly you recently, when I looked at one of your pieces of work, layering a sound bed and playing with sound to make the viewer feel that they're actually in the place is such a powerful thing that I'll put my hand up and say, honestly, for about 10 years, I didn't give much thought to. And anyone that knows anyone that works in post-production will tell you what you hear is much more important than what you see. So if I can impart anything from what I can put my hand up and say, like, I should have known this before, it's to look at building out a sound bed. And by a sound bed, I mean drawing people into the location that you happen to be talking about, that you are featuring in the piece. Because when there's no talking and when the music cuts out, you're left with the sound and the image. And that can be such a powerful thing.
And our post-production supervisor is very agreeing over here about that. Now, tell me some of your favorite tools that you use, Fernando.
Well, just to add a little bit to what Dave was saying, I think most of us do have a full kit with an onboard microphone on our cameras. And the reason we do that is because since we are doing documentary work, the sound component is important, even though it's not 100% verite. But it does provide feedback for the sound designer or the sound engineer to get a good idea of what the environment and the actual sounds were like, so that when they're composing for our films or our final videos, they can use that as a starting point. So I would definitely agree with Dave that, the microphones that tend to be overlooked, even though they're small and might not be the most expensive piece of gear in our kits, definitely give us an advantage.
Well, and you make a good point. We're often out there as a 1-man, 2-man, 3-man band. So, and not just the cinematography, but we're doing the sound, we're doing the script supervising, we're doing all of that. And yet we've got to create these beautiful pieces and there's so much in your head. So this is talking about sound is actually very vital because most of us out here are doing multiple things at the same time. And we've all been there on set. I've been helping with sound. I help with this. You guys do that. So it's vital.
Yes. And many times you can get scared of not doing it because you think that it's going to be complex.
Yeah.
Now all these cameras plus the technology that you can add onto them with the sync sound that you can bring into the camera, the time code, like all these things that you can pre-program go a long way for post.
Yeah.
So it's very convenient. And then of course we all use onboard monitors so that we can have a better viewing experience when we're working. And also these monitors have great tools for, judging exposure. And also when we're working quickly, it's very nice to be able to look over Dave's shoulder and know the kind of frame that he's got going on and where I need to be or where I need to move in order to complement my cinematography so that when we get to the edit, we have different angles and different perspectives for the editor. So I think that definitely the onboard monitor, which seems obvious, I would say is a great add-on and provides many tools and different uses for us on set.
Absolutely.
Also, just talking about the edit part, how to structure your sequences, right? I feel like in documentary, we get a lot of, we focus on subjects and people first. So we get our wides, medium close-ups. But to me, what really kind of draws it in, just like the sound, and sometimes what we forget is getting those like detail shots, those like the visual, the equivalent of ASMR, like you need to see. So to me, I've just made it a habit to never leave home without at least one macro lens when I'm going out to film. The cinema lenses have like their own, macro slider that you can actually shift them into macro, but I usually carry at least one of the Fujifilm. It's an 80mm macro. And I feel like that helps round out the story because then, at the end of the day, I always want to make sure that I get some type of detail. Like I'm, probably like as soon as we're wrapping, you find me like, in the grass looking for bugs or for ants or whatever. And I feel like that, all that stuff, it might not be used, but I feel like any of that texture is really, important. And also just I guess one techie-ish bit, for storytelling, I find it also important to keep in mind that you can have different frame rates at your disposal depending on what kind of story you want to tell. So what I like to do on our cameras is that there's a custom function dial on top, and instead of going into the menu and switching frame rates every time, I just set custom 1 to like 24 frames, custom 2 to 60 frames, custom 3 to 120, so that if I'm seeing something new quick, I can just flip it and I basically don't miss any of the action. So I think in terms of storytelling, the different types of shots and different frame rates, keep that in mind.
Oh, that's a great idea. I just learned something. I love it.
I'm going to add to that we have those same custom settings, but I also really like having the different function settings around the camera so that you can quickly go to any other setting that you need to change. Like instead of having to dig through the menu to get to where I'm going to change my white balance, I can just set a button on the top of my camera so that I can get there very fast, so that I don't miss the image that I'm trying to make because I was spending so much time trying to toggle through. So I think it's really important to customize your camera to your best needs as opposed to just leaving things in factory settings.
Oh my goodness. What other tips like that do you guys have? No, I'm really
Prep.
curious. Prep. Yeah. Prep. Yeah. Prep.
Prep is everything.
Yeah.
Prep is everything.
Yeah. What are some things in prep that you make sure you do every time that you learn that maybe you didn't do at first?
I always build the camera up now from ground up because I've realized in the past that if I just trust everything to be in the backpack, there's little elves in my house that just come and grab stuff, aka my 3.5-year-old. Camera parts go missing. So prep, it's worth the trouble. It's worth the time. I think building the camera is also it's just good discipline to have too. I think as a filmmaker is being prepared, because the last thing you want to do is have the team waiting on you. So that's a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm. You guys, any things that you maybe when you first started out you didn't do and you quickly were like, this is making my life easier on sets?
Yeah, I would definitely speak to what Kevin just said about prep. I am not the most disciplined person. I'm probably more of like the artistic side of a cinematographer. Like there's the technical stuff that I need to know, but I much more want to create and I want to connect with my subject and really get into it. Mm-hmm. So for me, having the discipline to build out a camera rig, but also just keeping a few spare things. The amount of times I've been on a job and it's been a mixed job, maybe a commercial job with stills and motion, and they haven't got a step-up ring for something. And just having some stuff like that where you've got doubles of things, which actually on these productions where we do have a director who is also a DP and we have a dedicated DP who is a dedicated DP, as you mentioned, we're looking at each other's monitors all the time. It's very dynamic. Mm-hmm. And just knowing that someone else has a secondary insert this lens or a macro lens to get some alternative shots, or even a mic kit because my lav goes down. Having those redundancies is very important. And we build that into our workflow in post when we look at RAID setups for all of our data. And I feel like, especially we talked about the limitations of these small camera systems. The upside to these small, affordable camera systems is that not only do you get good image quality out of them, you've got redundancy. You can put 3 bodies in a bag where an Alexa Mini would have taken up the space of that and more, right? So building in redundancy. And if you're like me and you're not super disciplined, be more disciplined. That's honestly what I've learned more than anything from all of these guys.
Well, and it not just goes with the cameras and the accessories, but also the hard drives. Redundant hard drives. We will put one on hard drive, put it on another hard drive and a third hard drive, and then we will travel separately and never ship everything back at the same time. So that way we never lose the footage, and yet we still.
In case one of us dies on a plane or something.
Don't say that. Come on.
Let's bring the tone down.
Jeez.
Sorry, but
this is why Kevin and I never travel on the same flight ever, for this redundancy issue.
Kevin,
we're still here, so it's working.
Let's start.
But no, we do that. We take responsibility and we grab the footage, we back it up again, and then we travel separately. We did that recently, because as you know, we've all lost footage.
And one of the cool things of the setups we have is we have the monitor that's also a recorder.
Yeah.
Which is running simultaneously. So we finish the day and we already have a double backup of everything that we shot on every camera, right? Because it's on the monitor, it's on the card. So immediately when you download the card, you already have 3 copies of the footage. Yeah. So if anything happens between the time that you finish shooting and the time you downloaded the media, you already have a backup. So that's a great value also of having those monitor recorders on board, because you're not losing any footage, any quality. It's all on the same codec.
Yep.
So it's great to have for the peace of mind of the producer and everybody on set. That you're done end of the day, double backup.
Absolutely.
You can have triple backup if you send it to the cloud.
Camera to cloud, yes.
There's the pitch, camera to cloud.
Now, I want to talk about some of the projects or experiments even, that have really helped you improve your storytelling, have really helped you get better at what you do, that like clicked in your head of like, wow, I did that. And you learned from it. Tell me about some of those projects that you've done, if anything sticks out.
I will go first on this one again too. So something that I have found is really important when you are trying to direct documentaries is that you have to get comfortable with your subject very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You're usually in situations where we have not been following this person for months or years. We are meeting them a few days before we are going to go film with them. And getting to know somebody in that quick of a time takes practice. You need to learn how to ask people questions, how to listen, how to pay attention to what other people are telling you about them to figure out what you need to then draw out from them beyond that. So I kind of take an approach of being a lifelong learner and seeing everything in my life as an opportunity to figure this out. So I would call this an experiment, I guess, of sorts. I have a really good friend who is a family photographer, and she photographs a lot of weddings, and sometimes she needs a second camera person, and I will go out with her. And in those moments, I'm recognizing that it's not just about the portraits you take. You are telling a story about this person's day. And you're meeting this person on a day that's very important to them and their family, and you need to figure out how to tell a story about them that they will look back on and say, oh, I love looking at the memories of this day, and that it's not just an outside person that clicked, but somebody that actually created an arc of the day for them. And it's a live event, and you don't get to ask people to do it again. So I use those opportunities as a chance to improve my storytelling skills and figure out, how can I get in here and very quickly, in a short amount of time, get to know someone and then create an archive of their life for them?
Mm-hmm.
And I think looking at every aspect of life, every moment you go to, and saying, how can this moment be a learning lesson for me to then improve myself in my craft is really important.
Something that I've picked up over time that I noticed that I've been getting better at was just learning how to do a good interview, being an interviewer. And I feel like something like that, I've learned, for me at least, has taken a long time. It's not something that kind of clicks in your mind overnight. It's something that you have to practice and practice and practice every time. And it's about, not only about, figuring out the right questions beforehand, but actually being immersed in the story and actively listening to the person. So you have to, as you're listening to the person, you then have to structure different questions in your mind that know how to bounce off of what they said. And so it's like trying to basically learn how to ride a bike or guitar or something. And like, it takes a long time and through repetitive practice, but that now at least I can be confident about saying that when I start interviewing, I'm already kind of structuring the story in my mind, and I can do this kind of multitasking, and that I think presents a much better interview and a much better story. So it's something to practice, but something that's very worthwhile, I think.
Kevin, I know when I see you on projects and you come out and you post what you've learned and how it affects you on your social media, tell me how that plays into your creative process for your next project after that.
I think because every project is so different, the thing that I try to do, like Dima was saying, trying to be as present as possible. I try as much as possible to immerse myself in whatever culture I'm diving into.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I recently did a shoot with Pamela at the beginning of the year in Daytona, where we got rained out the first 2 days of the race. So I didn't have anything to do for 2 days, and I thought, this is great, I could sleep. But instead, I decided to hang out with NASCAR fans. And it's kind of amazing because once you kind of at first, like, I was like, NASCAR is not really my thing, but once you immerse yourself with the culture and the crowd, and you kind of start learning and hearing stories about why they like it so much, not only do you gain a higher respect for that sport, but I think the people also look at you differently. They want to open up to you more. They want to share more stories. So I think that's part of it for me, is like really immersing myself as much as possible into any crazy scenario as I can, as much as possible, so that I can essentially gain trust too. That's part of it, is like showing people that you're not too good or you're not better or whatever. Like, just trying to be a part of the whole everything that's happening, I think for me is huge. I gotta be with the people in order to like really like feel what they're feeling and to kind of capture what they're essentially
Absolutely.
feeling, you know?
Absolutely. And Dave, tell me about your process from project to project when it comes to that and what you learn.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, just going back to speaking about the experience of the last 2.5 years, because for those of you that don't know who I am, I've been in New York for 12 years, 10 of which have been as a DP in the fashion world. So to go from the world of fashion where we're talking about, I mean, back then, maybe a 30 or 60 second campaign piece to be making what I would consider longer form documentaries of like 4 or 5 minutes, which is not long form, but after coming from the fashion world, that feels tremendously long to try and tell a meaningful story. I would honestly just say, if I could share anything, I've learned from this group, especially, and we talked about this last week at a panel in Austin, the intentionality behind what we are doing must be there, whether you are a photographer or a filmmaker. And what I mean by that is and we just did a photo walk and I was speaking to some of the people with us. Before the camera comes up, you have to have in your mind what you are wanting to photograph and why. Now, the image may be not great, but that's not the point. The point is that you must have a point of departure for where we're stepping off into. Otherwise, we're just stepping off into an abyss where you're trying to find that intentionality in post, and that's a place where all of us just don't want to be. Okay, so honestly, it comes down to what we were talking about before, immersion into culture, feeling like we're in whatever this story is, not seeing it from, oh, this is a job and this is a project and this is the talent. Okay. Like you can do that in a commercial setting and in a fashion setting because we're thrown together for maybe a day or two. Okay. And we're selling product. Here we're really trying to tell stories.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you have to have a point of departure when you enter into that project. And I'll be honest, I didn't really have that carved out, and I still am trying to learn, going back to lifelong learning, how to do that on every project. But if you start with that, you have a starting point, and then everything else can come back to that, good or bad. But without the starting point, you can be left flailing. And so if anything, and this was a point you raised last week, if anything that I can leave with this audience today is have that point of departure, pull the camera up, look through the viewfinder with a degree of intentionality behind what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. And I know with this title of the Toolbox, I really wanted to get into intention because that's, I think, even more important than the tools that we are using, because we can use anything. But like you said, if we don't have that intention, it doesn't matter what we're using. And Fernando, the way you approach things, I've always been, I just absolutely learned from. And it comes down to your intention. And before you even pick up that camera, you know what you're grabbing to in a high level sense.
Well, I had a mentor at one point and he came from the analog world, right? And I think that many things have changed since we jumped into this digital era.
Yeah.
And we've lost a lot of the processes that are in the middle of creating images and making all these videos and these films, right? So, and the one thing that he hammered down on me was that you always have to start with an idea in your head, right? And that idea has to be concrete in the sense that if you can find a reference of what you want to create, that's great. And you don't have to stick to it, right? You're not copying somebody else's work.
It's evolved.
You just have a starting point in your head. So a big part of my process is I collect references and I create a mood board of what I think the story looks like or feels like, so that when I get to the field and I'm on production, I already know how to make quick decisions based on those references. And I share those with the team so that we are all aligned. And everybody else is able to make decisions on the same page. And then the other thing that relates to processes is that one thing I really like to do is at the end of the day, I'll go through my footage. Even though I might not be editing, but I still like to go through my footage and I frame grab everything that I like and everything that I don't like. And I make a mood board of the things that I like and the ones that I don't, because it's a huge learning opportunity. So that the next time I'm out, I won't repeat the things that I didn't like. And also I share with the team the things that went well, so that we all know what's been captured, what's helping the story grow, and what still remains to be filmed, so that we can complete the story. Right? So I'm a huge fan of these processes and trying to build a little bit of slower processing into our fast-paced workspace.
Wow, that's great.
I think I like that's something that I've also learned to do as well, is basically trust yourself as a decision maker, like trust your decisions, and it's really about highlighting that process in your mind. Because if you don't trust yourself, you can't make those decisions as quick as possible. So if you see something, and if you don't like it, there's the idea in the back of your mind, and then you start to get concerned about it, that doesn't really work well, especially for these fast-paced productions. But if it's something where you trust yourself as a narrator, or like it as a decision maker, as a filmmaker, then you could be way more efficient in that process. I mean, I still love to shoot analog film because I think that helped me highlight the process as well. I know that, probably a lot of us started or have dipped our toes into analog, either filmmaking, either motion or stills. I feel like motion is, not as attainable anymore, but I do remember doing it in film school, and that helped really cement that process, because in film, even in stills, you have 36 exposures. Then you can't just be clicking left and right. You have to be intentional about the frame that you make. You have to know that this is the right frame, this is the right lens that I want to choose, and that really helps once again cement that process.
So to me, that's not even a limitation. That, to me, that limitation is actually helping your mind find that eye and find that intention, in my opinion. So.
Well, if I may just quickly jump in.
Please,
so up until last year, I was shooting with a film camera for 9 years for my street photography, and then it got replaced with the GFX. I didn't want to go back to digital for the exact reasons that Dima was talking about, and the lack of intentionality, I think, of what we can find ourselves in this digital world. It's really hard when you get used to it. Is a limitation. The limitation of analog is it costs money every time you click that shutter. How many photographers here are shooting film? A couple of people. People do it for different reasons. The reason I started 10 years ago was because we were capturing so much high resolution footage. I thought it would be a way for me to sharpen my intentionality sword. Okay. It is a limitation. Anyone here who's only shot digital, I would urge all of you, if you can, because it's not cheap to get film cameras and film anymore. Shoot a roll of film, 36 shots. That's it. That's all you've got. And every time you click the shutter, it costs money. And it's not just the cost of film, it's the cost of processing. And it's the time of scanning those negatives and then looking at them and being like, this is all shit. Let's start again. But those limitations are lacking in the digital world. And I shot with a film camera. Yes, I love street photography, but that has informed my video work as a limitation to corral me into something's not working. I'm not going to burn through gigabytes of data. Again, going back to intentionality, shooting with film for 9 years has more than anything affected my judicious nature of how I now capture motion.
Absolutely. Well, we're down to our last couple minutes. So quickly, for about 30 seconds, explain someone coming into this, someone who wants to move to the next level. What advice would you give, whether they're coming in or whether they're wanting to go to that next level in their career? What advice would you give? Who wants to go first?
I would say get comfortable with failure.
Yeah.
Get comfortable with making mistakes. Get comfortable with knowing that you don't know all the answers, and figure out what you can do to improve yourself each day. Because the reality is, even if you were at the top of your game, there's going to be a day that you're not. And you have to be okay with that. And you have to figure out how to say, okay, tomorrow's a new day and I'm going to start over again.
Absolutely.
I would say surround yourself with the people that you like to work. And people that think like you and share the same values and value the same experiences, because it makes a big difference.
It really does.
I've been fortunate enough that every stepping stone along the way, I've met people that I enjoy working with. And I've never had any bad experiences, but I'm sure that, having a group of people that think similarly than you in terms of the creativity and that aspire to create the same level of quality content that you want to create makes a big difference. So look for like-minded people in the creative aspect.
And for me, I think, I would say remember that the things you do outside of your career or outside of your projects are just as important as those. Remember to do things that keep you inspired, that keep your mind turning, that keep your creativity going. We don't have to be buried in the camera every time. You can say the drawing, unicycling, whatever. Just remember that inspires what you do in these moments. And even if it's so far and unconscious, all that matters.
Absolutely. Anything else? Any closing thoughts?
Just to reiterate, not only surround yourself with the people that you want to be around and work with, create the work that you want to be paid to create. We all hear it. We need to hear it more. If you're out there making a lot of money doing work that destroys your soul, you're not on a good path. And I've been there a couple of times in the last 12 years where the money's coming in and I'm like, great, I'm a successful DP in New York. No, the wheels will come off if you just focus on the bottom line. Surround yourself, embed yourself with not only the people, but also the projects that you want to do. And if you're not getting paid to do them anyway.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Let's give them a round of applause.
Good job, you.